The year is 1537, and conflict is a regular aspect of everyday life in the Eastland continent. Two noble houses, House Frena and House Gellish, have come together on the field of battle to do what nobles do best. Get married! This type of cross-dynasty merger was somewhat unprecedented, as it went against the traditional Eastflung mentality. This was not some spur-of-the-moment idea, however. This was a long-planned and carefully crafted arrangement. Military authority and taxation rights had already been negotiated and organized under a unified banner before the two had even formalized the legality of their union. And their new child was to be born with a new dynasty name to symbolize this construct: Gresh. That first new child was an intelligent, driven, and ambitious woman named Frith. Frith Gresh quickly assumed a military post at the astonishing age of 13, and spent most of her developing years campaigning in the constant skirmishes with other houses on the eastern borders. By 1555, she was a seasoned veteran, and formally assumed the throne of the new Gresh kingdom. She had already, by this point, picked out her intended suitor and quickly bore him a son, who she named Ucht in honor of her grandfather. Over the next few years, her life seemed to settle into a pattern as the business of state and motherhood dominated much of her time, but that was a lie. Frith was patient and a long-term thinker. She spent all her time hiring the greatest thinkers, economists, philosophers, veniists, and statesmen she could to tutor and train her young son. He was bright, possibly more brilliant than her, and took to his studies vigorously. By the time he reached the age of legality, he was ready to rule. Frith then put her plan into action and did the unthinkable. She willingly abdicated the throne to her son. No succession crisis, no assassination, peaceful transition of power. Much of the day-to-day governance had already been handled by the young Ucht regardless, so there was no real shift in policy for most. Ucht quickly appointed Frith his Grand Marshal and sent her to conquer the nearby kingdom of Droisia. This too had been planned for some time, and Droisia was completely unprepared for the hardened Gresh military. But here is when the 1-2 pounce of the Gresh strategy came to light. King Ucht Gresh enforced a peaceful, no looting, no suppression policy on the conquered territories. New citizens were to be treated the same as Gresh citizens, and the most of the existing counts and dukes remained in control of their territories, simply owing fealty to a different crown. By the time Droisia whole-scale surrendered, most of the former kingdom was already perfectly content to be Gresh instead of Droisian. It didn't affect them any. Over the next few years, this policy of peaceful conquest saw Gresh expand its borders substantially, often adding enemy forces to its own in the field. By 1582, Gresh emerged as the world's second superpower. This is when the Grand Marshal intended to go to war with Eastflung's other major superpower, the Higdat Kingdom. She thought this was a great idea, but as you might imagine, her more reasonable son vetoed the entire venture. Instead, he turned his eye westward, towards the conglomerate of Parish city-states. The Parish city-states have their own complex and in-depth history that can be best summarized by this. The important part is there was no coordination of any meaningful value, and who was in charge of what and where changed sometimes monthly. It was also home to one of the larger tapped magicite veins in recent memory. Having access to both the trade lanes and such a large source of magicite appealed to King Gresh, as you might imagine. So the kingdom led 3 army groups to take the continent and solidify it under Gresh control. This promptly made the kingdom of Higdat declare war on the kingdom of Gresh. This war is one of the stranger ones in recent history, as it mostly consisted of intermittent border skirmishes. Both sides were unwilling to commit their gigantic home armies to this conflict, since not only would loss in battle mean defeat in general, but simply moving said army away from defensive fortifications would practically ensure the other kingdoms would take advantage of the situation. This lengthy standoff led to a large no-man's land between the two superpowers, which sees action and conflict on a regular basis for many years to come. Meanwhile, the Gresh solidified control over Parish and, more importantly, established order. Maps were charted, counties drawn up, and established baronies and townships. The tiered system of nobility most Eastflung uses was put into place. King and Queen, Duke and Duchess, Count and Countess, Baron and Baroness, and of course, Mayor. Two interesting things happened during the extended Higdat-Gresh War. First, a Higdat-funded support team captured a large group of Igni and transported them to the Isle, hoping they would cause enough of a stir to mess with their enemy, but no. The Igni quickly escaped into the wild, and the Higdat were never able to find them again. The second is the Higdat sent a small army group to the Parish Isles with the intent of causing issues to the burgeoning territories and encouraging rebellion. The extensive fighting, first to pacify and now to hold Parish, resulted in reduced transportation, communication, and, most importantly, booze. Also food. These conflicts went nowhere for several years and ground down to what was effectively a stalemate between the two forces, as simply maintaining active forces in the area was starting to become prohibitively expensive in material, manpower, money, and tying up shipping to keep them supplies. Unfortunately, withdrawal by either side would leave an opening for the other, and so both just sort of stared at each other and slowly starved. All of this was disrupted in March of 1592 when the Fourmouth mine detonated. This caused magical shockwaves felt across most of the planet, sealed in the mine and nearby towns, killing tens of thousands, and, most importantly of all, sealing off or destroying any remaining magicite veins. With this disaster, both kingdoms took the opportunity to hammer out a temporary truce known as the Withdrawal Truce to allow their respective army groups to leave the Isles and return to the mainland. This was, naturally, a hectic and chaotic affair, with a large number of soldiers and support staff from both sides ending up being left behind, either due to deliberate desertion, lack of communication, or general disorder. With such a large number of professional armed soldiers remaining in the territory, they quickly disseminated into the already beleaguered counties. Some became bandits, some settled down, some became mercenaries, and some even established private fiefdoms.